Hello and good day. This video provides an overview on historical, philosophical, theoretical, and legal foundations of special and inclusive education. By having a perspective as to the ideas that underpin special and inclusive education, the events that led to its current state, and legislations that uphold the rights of learners with disabilities, giftedness, and talents, the student teachers can gain a better understanding and appreciation of special and inclusive education. In this video, I'll briefly introduce the significant events and milestones in every period that relates to the development of special and inclusive education. This will begin with the era of extermination, followed by the era of ridicule, asylum, and the early development of special education. The Philippine context of special and inclusive education will also be briefly discussed. Now let's start with the era of extermination. During the Greek and the Roman era, people held such negative views about disability that it was regarded as a punishment from God, something that signifies being bad or evil. Coupled with the need for military superiority, individuals with disability were labeled as defectives that need to be eliminated from the society. Thus, it was not surprising that there were calls for infanticide or that a father had a right to terminate their child's life if he or she happened to be born with disability. The same discriminatory treatment was also apparent during the early Christian era, since in the Old Testament, man is supposedly created by God in his own image. Disability was viewed as an impurity. Thus, a disabled person was denied some rights, for example, being prohibited to enter sacred places. Later, though this perspective changed as the New Testament presented Jesus being helpful to persons with disabilities, from viewing disability as a sign of evil, people's perspective changed to viewing persons with disability as needing help. The era of ridicule. During the Middle Ages, people lived in rigid caste systems that discrimination of individuals who were different from the majority in the society became apparent. Persons with disability were treated with ridicule, in which they were used as servants or fools, they were used as clowns, they were mocked for their deformities and behavior, or may even be ordered to put to death. The era of asylum. During the Renaissance period, the Catholic Church began accepting persons with disabilities as wards of state. This was the start of the humane treatment given to them. They were taken care for, albeit in isolation. However, the belief that once disabled, always disabled, rendered these individuals as uneducable. Being taken care for can be considered as humane treatment for persons with disability. A different perspective stipulates that without education, there is no humanity. Thus, to reinforce equal treatment among all humans, one should have the right to education regardless of his or her disability. This led some individuals to devise ways to deliver education to those with disabilities, and thus the start of the development of special and inclusive education. Among these individuals were Pedro Ponce de Leon, who provided education to deaf children from nobility, Abbe Charles Michel de Lupy, who put up an institute for the deaf, and Louis Braille, who invented the Braille script to allow the blind to read. Along with these developments are the people behind the curtains. Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard was one of the earliest teachers to argue that special teaching methods could be effective in educating disabled children. Next is Edward Seguin. Seguin's education program stressed the importance of developing independence and self-reliance in disabled students by presenting them with a combination of physical and intellectual tasks. Maria Montessori. Montessori's education is a flow of experience. It builds on the continuing self-construction of the child. She developed techniques and materials that can be used to teach learners with intellectual disability. Much has changed in how disability was viewed in the last century. The period of 1900s to 1950s had seen the rise of compulsory education. Classes suited for and schools especially designed to cater to individuals with intellectual disabilities blindness, deafness, and among others were created. At the end of the Second World War, the special educational system was created and organized in parallel to regular education. At this point, let's talk a little bit on how special education developed and evolved to become inclusive education. The classic view of special education are deemed to be different from other learners, which is why special programs and treatments are given to them. With this, they were segregated. With the developments of special education, little by little, educational institutions started to mainstream these children and thus integrating them with other learners. From a tradition of segregation, the learners with special educational needs had moved to inclusion, that these individuals should be treated normally as possible. This development was a result from combined efforts of countries and organizations such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNESCO Salamanca Statement and the Framework for Action, and the Dakar Framework for Action, and many others. Locally, the need for special and inclusive education has also been recognized. That is the reason why a lot of milestones have been achieved here in the Philippines, leading to different laws and orders were implemented. And the most recent here is that the CMO 74 to 77, which is the policies, standards, and guidelines for teacher education programs, were implemented by the Commission on Higher Education. A lot of developments are done with special and inclusive education, where the educational system caters for all learners with diverse needs, abilities, and characteristics. Nevertheless, it is important to trace back the root and how people view and respond to individuals whose conditions and needs are different from the majority in order for us to have a wider perspective.